Hey, Jason.
Hey, what's up?
Hey, happy Friday, everybody. Um, this is Making Sense with Move to Amend. We're going to try to make sense of some of the nonsense of this week. And before we get into things, let's introduce ourselves, and then I'll talk quickly about Move to Amend in case you're not familiar and you're here for the first time. I'm Jessica Munger. I'm Move to Amend's program director. And I'm really glad to be here. I use she, her pronouns, and I've been with Move to Amend about going on 7 years now, and really glad to see everybody here today.
And I'm Jason Bayless. I'm on the National Board of Directors for Move to Amend. I'm spacing on how many years I've been with Move to Amend, but it's been a while, so I'm happy to be here. And I'm really excited to do Making Sense with Jessica and be here with all of you in the chat so we can discuss what's going on in the world this week. Because I don't think much happened this week, but we'll find out soon.
Pretty chill week. I don't know. We're gonna talk about sports or something probably. So before we get started on the nonsense, in case you're new here, welcome. Move to Amend is a national grassroots organization working to abolish corporate constitutional rights and money as free speech through a constitutional amendment to the US Constitution. We have affiliates, or what we call our chapters, all over the country. Many of you watching today are affiliate members, I'm sure. And we do lots of grassroots movement building, public education, lobbying, passing local resolutions, lots of other tactics towards the goal of creating a more just and democratic world. And we focus a lot in that work on movement building and on anti-oppression work, because we understand that corporate power is inextricable from the violence of white supremacy and corporatism and corporate capitalism that continue this cycle of violence and destruction, just to put it bluntly. So that's Move to Amend. We take a grassroots approach to constitutional renewal. And
the easy work.
That's all. Does today feel like a lot? I feel like this some weeks this is an easier job than other weeks. We're like, sure, we'll do it on Friday, not knowing what's to come. So as we're going, please feel free to make comments. This is a fairly informal conversation, and you can chat with us if you feel like it.
And please do. We want that.
Please do. And I want to give a shout out to Alfonso, who is making everything work. Thank you so much for all the magic that you work from your computer. Appreciate you. So, how was your week, Jason?
My week was good. I think before we actually jump into the topics, maybe it is important for us just to take time, knowing that it's Friday, knowing that a lot of things have happened, that we just take time and say, hey, life is still good. Everything's going to be okay. And the work that we're doing with Move to Amend, the work that people are doing out in the world to actually building that better world, coming together, as long as we stay together, building that community and take time to just take that breath, it's going to be okay. It's not going to be easy, but it's going to be okay. So maybe we just acknowledge that moment at this time before we start going, what the fuck happened this week?
Thanks for that. Actually, I needed that today because I've been in that mindset all morning. So yeah, thanks. I feel like we could start with a moment of hope, and that's good. And one thing specifically about what you're talking about is all the amazing people on this call. Hi, Judith. Hi, Greg. People who, so many of you just dedicate so much of your energy and time and resources to creating this world. And you're the reason why we're not all going to bang our heads into the wall over and over today. So thanks for that.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you, Jude.
So, grounded in that, what the fuck is happening?
That shit would be the name of this program. What the WTF Friday?
Anyway. Yeah.
Yeah. So what has happened this week? I think the most obvious um, on people's mind is the second impeachment of Trump and that process. And in the vein, before we jump into it, just in the vein of recognizing the good things and the amazing things and the historical things that happened in this is what stood out to me in this moment. And I want to say that this moment does not represent that we are in a better place, things are better, but it points to that we are moving to a better place. The fact that we had so many women, so many people of color, being women of color, representing the people on the floor of the Senate and calling out directly, using the words that the president supports and is a white supremacist, was for me historical in the making, because that it begins the shift of the conversation that we can have in this country about what's needed to create the world that we all want, desire, and need. Um, because if we're not naming it, then we're never going to address it. And to see it named, I know it has trigger warnings and there's a lot to unpack, but the fact that it happened, I've never witnessed something like that in my lifetime. And I think it's historical. It's something that we need to take pause to uplift and help pave that path forward. So, with that, that was a really uplifting moment for me.
Oh, that's so right. And thank you, because it's not very often that you and I talk and we're like, did you see that revolutionary thing that happened on the House floor today? But like, actually, yeah, like Cori Bush, like said it like it is and was publicly booed for it, which is also just of note, that, yeah, that was super powerful. So again, thanks for bringing like the real optimism like that. That was a really great moment. Unfortunately, like in response to, this terribly um, violent situation that we find ourselves in. And so, we are, as Move to Amend, asking folks to ask that the Senate, convict Trump. And I think that distinction is important, because being impeached, as we know, like doesn't really do much, right? But if he is convicted by the Senate, that means like he doesn't get his travel stipend, he doesn't get the security detail and all of those things. But probably most importantly, he can't run again for president, which, as we know, like these things don't just go away, right? Trump is like could be a tool to use in the future, and it's important that that's not allowed. So there's that. And you can find that information here. Thanks, Alfonso, for putting that up. We're asking you just to send a quick message and say that that's important to you.
Yeah, and yes, definitely thanks, Alfonso, for like the link that he put up there and just the act, because there's a lot of groups and a lot of individuals are out there calling for the need to call our senators and to voice um, the need to convict Trump. And so, if it's fine with you, I want to kind of unpack that a little bit, because even in the other circles in a conversation I was in before this one, there are people who see their senators as already bought into the Trump train and are not going to budge. So they're asking, why should I even call? My voice is not going to be received in this way. So with that, why is it important for people to even do it as a symbolic act? Should it be even act as a symbolic act? Because there's a lot of layers that are happening, and why would this be effective for people to even do this act, even if their senator is not supportive? Do you have any insight on that?
Well, I think that I don't know. To be honest, like, I don't know how symbolic an act that is. Like, I'm not sure. I know from my time, like working with Congress, I know that hearing from constituents actually does, in some cases, like move people. And that works sometimes. I think also that, practicing trying to hold people accountable is a skill that we could use to build. What are you thinking?
Yeah, I think it's great to have. It has a great potential to move. Let's say if there is somebody who we are perceiving as being already full on in the camp, and they get 100,000 calls from people saying, "What are you thinking? We have to do this. This might move people. It might um, do something different because I think there's just a recognition as like what we are perceiving people being full on in the camp may not be the full story. It's just what we're seeing. So there's a great opportunity, as you said, to actually train our muscle and holding our elected officials accountable and being to participate in that. I mean, that's not all we should do. We should, there's again layers of areas that we should work, but I think at this point in time, even doing it, even if you think um, your voice is not going to be heard fully in that, might actually also give you the freedom to say what you really want to say, and versus like if and not worry about if tiptoeing on trying to be political, but really just being direct. Uh, and that practice in itself is going to be good on multiple levels.
Yeah, we're going to need to get comfortable with that.
Yeah.
Right. And to be honest, like I find it quite cathartic to, have a glass of wine and call up and leave a message. Like I gotta yell at somebody, and there are some people who deserve it. So let's, let them know what we have to say. No harm in that. So please do call. It takes just a minute, and it's not fun. So thanks for that, Jason. I think that's important to because that's like a very fair feeling to have, that they are not responsive to us, and that that going through Congress in any way to expect some sort of justice feels futile, and I understand that too. So it's important to know why we're doing these things, and I think we nailed it down at least as much as we can now. We'll see, but like you have 2 minutes, so you might as well, right?
Yep.
Okay, so also talking about the further unfolding of some of this white supremacist insurrection at the Capitol last week, there is a lot going on and a lot of potential also for just so much further chaos and violence to happen. And this weekend is expected to be, a moment of that.
You cut out on me, so I didn't catch what you said.
Oh, sorry about that. I was just saying this weekend is going to be a moment. There's actions being planned all over the place, and so I'm sure there'll be more to talk about next week. But already some of the unfolding of this has been incredibly not surprising, but dangerous.
Yeah. I think the dangerous element of it is probably really good to tease out a little bit in this process, because the danger is really wrapped up in white supremacy and the fascination and the commitment to fascism. And we're seeing that come up in this, what happened previous weeks, which also was talked about last week on Making Sense, was the storming of the Capitol building and what that means, and how it was organized, and the people behind it who organize it are deeply rooted in white supremacy, and they were able to organize and make this happen fairly openly, because of the infiltration of white supremacy within our institutions, both in the House, Senate, and our police and military forces. The social media network that the white supremacists use, that is normally used for far right leaning ideologies, Parlor, was hacked before it was actually taken down, and the data was removed by hackers, and they're starting to analyze it, and the information is starting to come out. And Vice just wrote, I think it was this morning. Yeah, I think the article came out this morning. Vice wrote an article about how people are starting to analyze that data, and the data is actually showing they're geolocating where most of the posts happen throughout the country. And they're saying that the data is showing that users are posting from majority of the users are posting from military bases. Um, One, there's just just to be transparent and kind of holistic in this approach. That doesn't mean that our military is full on white supremacy. It might. What this is saying is that the data is showing that there's a high concentration of white supremacy, far right ideologies within our military ranks. And that could be, the data says that just shows geolocation. It doesn't actually speak about the individuals. So that could be civilians who work on the base. That could be family members who come visit the base and post it. And it could also mean that they're actually enlisted people who are posting this, which all three of those categories are troublesome and worrisome, especially because we just launched the National Guard to sit inside um, the Capitol building to protect to protect people, and we don't know how many of those people, you know, are soft on the protecting of the Capitol. And there's an investigation done by the system itself, by FBI, to start, and the Army, to look at that to see what how much of it is saturated so they can take action on it, how much that's worth. But it really points to that old saying that I grew up with. At least I remember when I was 13 hearing it for the first time at a punk rock show, saying, the cops and the Klan go hand in hand. Is like, this is that statement showing up, like, that gives truth to it, and that we've been pointing to this forever. The rise of Black Lives Matter is pointing at this. This is why um, is the need for the movement, because there's such institutionalized racism and individuals who are bringing that forward within the institution. So this is critical for this to be part of our lens and our looking as we build that better world and that better government structure. So I'm going to stop talking because I'm ranting. It's your turn.
No, that's a really important. That is very important. That's not a rant. That's like that. Highlight that, And Linda's asking, where did you get the information about the bases? Did you say was that a Vice?
Yeah, I think what I'll do is I'll share this link with Alfonso here in our chat, and so he can post it in the live stream chat.
Cool.
I think you can grab that, Alfonso.
Yeah, so definitely. So definitely underscoring that point that we not like what you're saying about the military bases, and also we all saw those cops taking selfies with those white supremacists, right? Like, we all saw that. Let's just let's not let that slip away. That happened. Those are their buddies, and there you have it. There's a couple questions that I wanted to address that I think relate to some of this. Judith's wondering how much corporate media you think might be responsible for Trump's insurrection. And so, Parler is an example for sure.
Yeah, I think it's a nuanced answer. So the obvious answer is media groups like Fox News played a major part of it. But there's an understanding also with that this just didn't start with Trump. There was a long line of introducing this type of rhetoric, seeing what sticks, continuing to escalate it. And there were keystone moments that helped it escalate faster, like when Obama became president. That, I don't know what it did, but it made the glue that held us so much together come apart, and white supremacy started coming through that crack, those cracks. I think when we look at corporate media in terms of like CNN, I'm not trying to target CNN. I'm just saying CNN as an example of what I'm talking about. I think it stems from us having to look at who controls those media outlets, and this is kind of where Move to Amend points to, is like these are corporate entities that control the corporate interest, and somewhat control the narrative because of the system of advertisement and supporting each other in that corporate environment. They're not going to say things that are going to be extreme, that it's going to speak closer to the truth, that's going to push away advertisement. The news is becoming a part of more so of selling advertisement than sharing information in terms of the mainstream. There are outlets out there that do a great job, but I don't know if I would consider them mainstream by that definition. So I think taking on the issue of corporate constitutional rights and corporate power will help us get back to where we're reporting news and reporting facts versus trying to cater an identity or product. What do you think?
Yeah, that's exactly what I'd say too. I think that corporate power itself, like as a force, is so much at the root of what we're seeing here. Like this is the inevitable flower of corporate capitalism and white supremacy embedded in the very DNA of this country. This is all, nurturing each other, and here we are. So yeah, I mean, yeah, in the short term, yes, and in the long term, yes, for sure. Let's see, there was another question that I wanted to talk about. Sorry, here. Someone asked, do you think Biden might favor the 20th Amendment to blunt corporate power by amending the US Constitution to end corporate personhood and money as speech? The short answer is no. Like, to be blunt, no. The thing that I guess potentially exists now is that Democrats have like a slightly less of an excuse not to do anything helpful. So like maybe that will help. But no, Biden is as corporate as they get. So it's not about the party. It's about the cash. So there's zero indication from Biden or anyone in his cabinet or corporate administration that they would be on our side at all. Just to be clear, we'll see. But
I think you're spot on with that. Is like those who are currently in power. I don't want to say all of them, but those who we were speaking of are currently in power are drawn to be in that power because they see value in the empire. So they're going to uplift the empire. They may have great intentions and great thoughts and saying that we want to change things, but there's I'm going to say this in a benefit of the doubt kind of thing. They're not given the space to have the critical analysis of what's needed to change that empire. The structure that is there, it's hard. I'm going to sound like an apologist for them, but I just doing this for the sake of the conversation. It might be hard for them to step too far out of line to start changing the system because they will no longer hold power within that system. So there's a vicious cycle looping of like, we'll do small steps. We'll do, and it kind of falls into that idea of, what grassroots organizing and other groups fall into, the trap they fall into is like, if we wake up enough people, or if we educate enough people, then we'll reach a critical mass and change will happen, which is somewhat true. But the timeline that that will actually happen is so much further down the road than what's needed. So, um, and waking somebody up and educating somebody doesn't guarantee that individual, that somebody is going to maintain awake. Um, so I think that's why there's mass mobilizations, why there's groups like Move to Amend who push really hard on the envelope of what's needed, while we have to just nip it in the bud, corporate constitutional rights and money and speech. Um, because without those two being removed, we don't have access to pushing our politicians. We can hold them accountable, but we can't push them in an effective way. Um, so it's a vicious cycle.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And Judith is right. We need the We the People amendment is a very critical tactic towards dismantling some of the tools that are used to do all of these things that we're talking about, right? It's not the end all be all. It doesn't make the world suddenly some, like, people's utopia, but it does take away a really useful tool for them. So I'm going to plug real quick before we answer another question that we're going to need you all at the beginning of this new year. We're going to really need you to be ready to make some calls and to talk to your Congress people about coming on as a co-sponsor to the We the People amendment, right? We know there's a million things that need our direct attention right now. And so let's just be diligent when the time comes and our amendment gets reintroduced, that we are ready to put some pressure on these folks to come on as a co-sponsor, so that we can, get to more organizing in our communities. It's important that they hear us, because hundreds of communities all across the country, all across the political spectrum, have voted to show their support for the We the People amendment. And so, and is it ever more clear than right now that corporations are at the heart of so much of the violence that's taking place? So let's do what we can to make that happen. Alfonso just put a link there that you can check out, and we'll talk to you a lot more about this as we need you to start making those calls. There's a question from Greg here. What do you think about the corporations that have announced that they are at least temporarily halting their political contributions to those GOPs connected to the election, including those that challenge the seating of electors? What do you think about that?
Sorry, you cut out on, I think, the core of that sentence. So could you just, well, there it is. What do you think about the corporations that has announced that they at least temporarily halting their political contribution investments to those GOPers connected to the? Yeah, I think we're in a great transition moment, and a great moment of being able to shine the spotlight to it. So corporations who take a stand and are vocal and taking a stand to help remove, either whether it's financial power or financial support or any other support, is potentially a great move, because it also shows that the large percentage, hopefully it shows that the large percent of the country does not support and subscribe to white supremacy, white racist and fascist viewpoints. And that, again, that doesn't mean that we've cleared out issues of whiteness. It just means that people have a concept level of white supremacy in the frame of racism, of that we know it is not a core value. So when we see corporations pulling money out, I think it's great. It sends a great message, because it tells politicians they're not going to receive the money from the corporations if they continue to think this way. And what I would love to see from the corporations is say, we're going to stop investing in you and actually start investing in what we want and set that example what the future could be, what you could invest in. And that could be yeah, that could be a whole spectrum of thing. I don't need to answer what that might be, but what do you think?
Well, thanks for saying that. To be honest, is a little bit more like optimistic than I've been feeling about that. But that I think you make a good point, right? So how I've been feeling about it is like, kind of like, where were you? Like, what have you been doing? It's not like this just happened, you know? Like, you could have maybe, like, I don't know, stopped some of these things instead of just apologizing later. And that's made me feel like too little, too fucking late. But also what you're saying is true, that like law and culture have this relationship, and in this time, like these mega corporations in some ways have become like the moral compass for people, I guess, you know, in like making statements about like what's legitimate or what's not. And so what you're saying is a good point, that you know, that it's kind of a big deal to have like Twitter say, you know, white supremacy is a thing and it's bad. And it's like, yeah, well, we know, and you're too late, but now that you're on board, like, that's good, you know?
Yeah. No, absolutely. I think there's a duality there that we as organizers should hold, and a healthy balance. Um, the optimism is, yeah, great, you're doing this, but you need to do more. And exactly to what you're saying is, where the hell were you before? Why is this now important to you? Why couldn't you take that stand? And that's kind of where that accountability towards politicians, to corporations, to our active participation matters. Um, because where were we telling Twitter? I mean, this is a generic statement because there were people doing this, I know, but collectively, where were we telling Twitter, what the fuck? Get rid of him, take him off. Where was the mobilization of blocking access to Twitter, Facebook, and stuff, um, impacting them to do the changes that are needed? Where, you know, we have to mobilize also to stop the voices, um, and not, again, broad stroke statement, and not wait for the powers, the corporations to do it. That's important of mobilization, important of community, important of keeping our values, of like why it's important for Move to Amend to put the foot forward that we are anti-oppression. So everything is rooted in that. So we make sure we bring that forward, and there's just a collective, um, for lack of a better term, education that we also still need to build the muscle around, to hold the corporations accountable equally as we do politicians, and recognize when they finally come around and do something, to ensure that it's not greenwashing, ensure that there's not doing it so they can keep their financial investors. Because if they show up that way, then we can go after their financial investors. Pressure campaigns do wonders of shifting corporate thoughts quickly. So
Yeah. There's a comment here about, you know, that big fear that this will be used as an excuse to further remove the rights of people. And that's something we wanted to talk about for sure. And what you were saying about being able to hold that duality is really important. I think there's a lot of moments right now where we're going to have to hold things simultaneously, right? Yes, and like, we have to be able to like understand the nuances here. So I think this is a good question to lead us into that conversation, right? Understanding that fascists are opportunists, right? We've seen that so many times, and we have to be informed by history about the dangers of authoritarian creep after an event like this. You know, just to say, like, Biden during the uprisings this summer was saying that he wanted anarchists arrested. And now he's the person who is now, you know, pushing for a crackdown on domestic terrorism. So that's a problem, right? Tell me what you're thinking about all this.
I think it's fine. No, I'm kidding. Yeah, I think there is I think it's spot on. It's again looking at the history and the record, and knowing that the system is going to do everything it can to maintain the system. When it comes to Biden, and again, this is a duality. Biden may have done good things. He may do good things, but in this case, the other side of the coin is also Biden has claimed many, many, many of times that he practically wrote the Patriot Act after 9/11. What did we learn from the Patriot Act? We learned that it gave permission for mass surveillance of law-abiding citizens for under the umbrella of national security. Um, you can take that narrative back even further, and we look at COINTELPRO, what impact that has. These are you can just look at history, and it slowly increases, not just in this country, around the world. We're seeing it happen right now in the Philippines. We're seeing it happen in Brazil. We're seeing this idea of under the guise of national security or taking on terrorists or protecting speech from whatever entity has never been in the interest of all the people. It's always been in the interest of maintaining and controlling power for those who hold the power. Um, all the way down to we can even tease out a ripple effect of the Patriot Act was the Animal Enterprise Terrorist Act, which labeled anybody who caused economic damage, defined economic damage was defined by the system, not by anything else, by the institution. But anybody who caused economic damage to an animal enterprise, which means fast food restaurants, farms, fur industry, um, anything that an animal rights activist would target, would automatically be charged as a terrorist. And they went after people who ran websites, saying because you had a website, you were causing economic damage to this entity, and 5 people were charged under the Animal Enterprise Terrorist Act as terrorists and served time. That's just one example. We can point at other areas of why this idea of Biden saying that we need more laws, we need a stricter bill that curbs this. It's problematic because we currently do have those. I mean, Donald Trump trying to lift up his support, passed uh, um, executive order that says that even criminalize more people who damage government property. Um, so the laws are there, and I would be very, very weary, and we keep an eye on and vocal and active around making sure that we don't go down that path, because that path is a very slippery slope. And the left needs to also understand when the FBI and saying, "Hey, do our work for us, send us photos, become of the people, help us identify these people," is also a slippery slope for us, because that is not the relationship that we need to be focusing on. We should not be putting energy in lifting up the system so the system can do better work. We should be lifting up the people so the people can do better work, bringing democracy to a local level and representing that way, not giving power, giving our power away to the institutions and the systems, because it's not in our interest. Whew, I'm done.
No, that's super important. And right now, it's hard sometimes to know how to feel or what you want to happen, because it's very hard to figure out what justice looks like in a system that there's no justice, there's no solution that is justice. And so it's you want these people to face consequences and and repercussions, and yet if we're going to be abolitionists, we have to be abolitionists all the time, not just when things are smooth. And so for me right now, as I'm feeling conflicting things, I'm trying to look towards prison abolitionists to understand, like, how are they framing this? How do we create accountability for not just these people, but this emboldened white supremacist movement, without bolstering the carceral state, right? That's hard. But I think it's important that we not, you know, facilitate authoritarianism, because, like you're saying, the Patriot Act, I think, was definitely like the most violent, torturous thing, like, that maybe happened in my lifetime. You know what I mean? Like, there are people who, I think about my little sister, who was born right after 9/11, and she doesn't know a world pre-Patriot Act. And like, the world is really different. And I think this is a moment where we need to really be careful, and look towards those who know what they're doing.
Yeah, and just to the comment that popped up from Greg, it is a slippery slope. He's naming that there's already many states that passed anti-protest bills. Absolutely. Going back to the Animal Enterprise Act, because there was so much pushback on that act, that you started seeing states do ag gag laws in local, meaning that you couldn't film, you couldn't go to, even on public sidewalk, you couldn't film an industry that potentially did that, and they start silencing, the public voice, the public action, to holding the corporations, the companies in the system accountable when they're harming the environment, when they're not holding up their side of the bargain. So yeah, it's and the bills that Greg has pointed to and linked to, and that is just another great example of that. It's 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 dangerous, especially knowing, let's link it back. Let's tie a thread, whether it's 100% accurate or not, but let's tie a thread. The Parler data showing that, the white supremacist, far right leanings, fascist leanings, are coming from our locations where our government institutions are, should also keep raising that flag much higher, that there's a systemic problem here.
Absolutely. Yeah. And speaking of that systemic problem, I just wanted to make sure that we mentioned that there is now, like, mounting evidence that sitting Republican Congresspeople were involved in the facilitation of this event at the Capitol. And that this is not, I think we need to be careful in thinking that there's this, like, mob of people who are fringy and not, like, that they're just, like, crazy people. Like, that's, like, there were people in suits with briefcases in their offices making this happen too. So let's not get it twisted that this is just some, like, out there thing. Like, these are people who not only are in the military, but who are working in the halls of Congress, right? So just a couple of things that have come out were that Congressman Mike Sherrill, I think is how you say his name, says that some members of Congress led groups through the Capitol building on, like, a reconnaissance tour before the riot, right, to check things out. Ayanna Pressley's panic buttons inside her office were torn out of their places, and she's used them before without, having this problem, and she hasn't switched offices. Like, someone tore out her panic buttons. That's quite alarming. Representative Lauren Boebert, I think is how you say her name, was tweeting Nancy Pelosi's movements during the event, like, throughout the Capitol. So white supremacists, like, wear suits too, and they get elected, and they are among us, and they're operating in a highly, like, coordinated fashion. And I just think it needs to be said. And, like, there were bombs planted all over the city too that I think people aren't talking about as much. This is, like, much bigger than just this. And also, I was hearing about this on Democracy Now! This morning, that that there were very likely plans to kidnap and assassinate members of Congress. So, speaking of being systemic,
Yeah,
there we go.
it's heavy. It's real. And we can say that this has been pointed at a lot over the years. At least in my lifetime, I can definitely remember being in circles and people pointing at this, and I even know in my own political beliefs, generically speaking, being a far leftist, I say that kind of tongue in cheek, second guessing my own thoughts of what I'm seeing and witnessing, and having that be kind of subdued or removed because my rational thinking is like, no, there's good people in the world. You know, this couldn't be happening. And being taught, I grew up in Texas, but also being taught that white supremacy looks like a hood and robe. White supremacy was a hood and robe that existed in a specific era. And that white supremacy that we see that stemmed from that was such a small fringe, the hammerhead skins, the spin-off groups like that was always fed to me. And I take ownership of eating it and not taking it further and analyzing what it means. But seeing that and having that idea that this is what white supremacy and this is what racism looks like. And when I see it in real life and happening within institutions, when I see it happening in workplaces, when I see it happening in my daily life, it's hard to swallow that pill that this is actually happening, because everything says to the contrary. Everything that we're taught is said to the contrary. That we're a great nation. We have this exceptionalism of this moral great value of creating something. And it's not. So I'm saying that because I think all of us need to recognize that that is, I think, the foundation where we all kind of come from, and why it's hard, or why it's easy to be in disbelief when we see these things happen. But there has to be that stepping stone that takes us over the hump and says, no, this is the way the system has always been created and formed, and it's doing the things that we're seeing that we think is in disbelief and is just a fringe, is actually part of the way it's supposed to work. The disfranchising of people has been baked in to every facet of that system. So when we look at what's happening in the storming of the Capitol, that act in itself, of seeing that happen, yeah, we can be in disbelief and shock in it. Um, and it's also, and it can be a fringe of the expression of that system, but it's still part of that. I mean, like, we had a conversation the other day with a couple Indigenous leaders, and they're saying they're looking at this situation. It's like, this is the system that you created. This is you fighting you. Um, this is not, racist versus non-racist. This is the system that you created, uplifted. This is you fighting you. And that took me back. That was like, yeah, it's the recognition of that exceptionalism that we constantly reinforce with good intentions, is what's at stake, and what we have to really analyze so we can create that hump to get past this and start actually building what's needed, the people power that's needed to maintain and create new.
Yeah, that's really well said. Absolutely. I think, I see some folks, saying, like every couple months, like, this isn't us, this isn't America. And I'm like, yo, the founders, like, the framers of your constitution like literally owned human beings. So I don't understand how you think this isn't America. Like, this is how it was designed. So I think that most of you who are on this call know, but like in case you don't, Move to Amend has been asking the question for over a decade, like, what would it be like to have like foundations that actually worked for the people and not just corporations and property? Like, what would it be like to have a constitution that actually keeps in mind like human rights and rights of nature and like put life above property and profit? And I think that it's hard to have a conversation about anything that's happening right now without understanding that this is all by design. This is all rooted in institutions and systems that were created this way. And so like, there's only so many bandages that you can put on until you recognize that like these bandages aren't fixing anything. And there's a root of this problem. And so, I invite you, if you're interested in thinking about People's Constitution, to visit the website peoplesconstitution.us and engage with us in conversation and learn about how actually the way that things are done here isn't the way things are done everywhere, and that there are better alternatives. Like, a better world is possible. Like, I know that's said a lot, but that's because it's true. The real like despair, I think, that can be found in moments like this can only really, the antidote is only to know that like actually something better is possible. And that's why I can wake up in the morning, because we're not actually stuck here. We do have the power to make real change and do something radically better, but it's going to require us to like get rid of our heroes and see things for what's happening and understand the really hard truths and the shame in all of this, and be able to be empowered to actually build something better and confront our history.
Yeah. And for some reason, since I'm playing that optimist role, which is, I don't know if that's part of my...
It's new for you. I like it.
It's a new hat for me, I guess, maybe. I don't know. But just to play that role again, it's the recognition that all the problems that we're facing and that are in front of us, we created. So the beauty of that knowledge is that if we created it, we can also destroy and recreate. Because it's not something that is so mystical and so unknown and so far from our reach that we can't have agency in it. We were the agents who created it, whether we had participated in it directly or inherited it through generations. And we have the same power to change that rhythm to a new direction.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And yes, there's more of us than them. Absolutely.
Yeah, that's powerful. So I think like when we're talking about how to meet this moment and like what can we, as someone in the comments said, like, what can we do today? So what you can do today is a couple things, right? Like really acutely, you can call your senators. That's a thing you could do today. But another thing you could do today includes, if you haven't gotten involved with Move to Amend, go to movetoamend.org, get involved. A lot of you on this call already are. And fight the manifestations of corporate power, because these things are corporate power, right? This is colonialism, this is capitalism, this is corporate power, this is white supremacy. These things are all interwoven. So that's a really important step. If you're trying to chop at the roots, corporate power is a really good place to put your energy. Another thing you can do is like be building in your community. I think that it's, like we've talked about before, it's really important that we're building alternatives outside of the system, outside of what we're waiting on these people to give us or not give us, right? We have to be doing community mutual aid, community care. We have to be, investing in alternative structures with our neighbors. I really believe that is key. And I do encourage you to be thinking about, letting go of some of the hangups that we have about needing to be polite all the time to our Congress people, and like begging for crumbs all the time and compromising before we need to. And like, this is not a time for us to be like, please, may I have some more, right? This is a time for us to be like emboldened and take direct action, because, begging for crumbs is a thing of the past. Like, this is not the world of begging for crumbs anymore. So, please do be willing to talk to your electeds like you mean it, because in theory they work for you. So I guess I'll say that. And I think also I just want to extend another invitation to engage with the People's Constitution Project. If that seems like, if you're saying that's a pipe dream, or that's too scary, or that's too big, like, again, like, where are those fears coming from? Why does it feel scary to have a conversation? And why does it feel scary to entertain something that happens as a natural process within functioning democracy, right? Let's be understanding that the right has a plan. They're well coordinated. We've seen this. And if that's the case, like, we also need to be not necessarily just in defense, but in offense too. Like, we have to be well coordinated. We have to have a plan. And so much revolutionary movement that happens depends on having an understanding that that there is something we're working towards. So let's make a vision of what a people's constitution or a people's constitution renewal process could be like, and let's not let the right out organize us. We can't let that happen because we think something's too hard, right? So I invite you to drop some of your fears at the door and think about engaging with that conversation too. And just like, thank you so much. So many of you in the comments here are just like the most badass people who are doing the most badass organizing in all these fronts of struggle against corporate power and all the adjacent issues. And I respect you so much. Thanks for being here.
Absolutely. Thank you for being here. And one thing I would just add is like, just the idea is like, there's no path forward where we're doing this alone. You can't do this alone. So make sure you're being in conversation with other people that can help you think things through. Even if you have fears, have somebody there that you can trust and that's going to be with you to do this. Just for the simple fact, knowing that we are smart as individuals, but together we are geniuses, and we need that genius thinking to break through what's in front of us.
Absolutely. Well, that feels like an inspiring note to leave you on. I want to make a couple of announcements before we get going, because there is stuff that I want to invite you to. We're doing lots of organizing right now. So there's an upcoming webinar and campaign kickoff January 21st from 5 to 6:30 Pacific, 8 to 9:30 Eastern. And that, what I was telling you about, like, needing to go hard with our Congress people, you can learn all about that campaign and get involved there. Take action to call your senators and tell them to convict Trump. MoveToAmend.org/convict_Trump. Alfonso has put all these in the chat too, so you can see them. Learn how to set up a congressional meeting and get prepared to really lobby a congressperson. We've got tons of materials coming out. We're going to help you get 100 congresspeople in the House, and that's our goal. So, like, let's get these people to actually do something that we need them to do that's helpful. That'd be great. And you can go to movetoamend.org/lobby_2021. We've got a live report coming up, which will happen on Facebook. The next one is January 27th at 5 Pacific, 8 Eastern. And then, of course, please go tell all your friends to sign the petition at movetoamend.org/motion. Or you can text the word sign to sign or amend, either one will work, to 707-654-4019. Movetoamend.org/motion. That just gets you in our movement, right? That allows us to tell you what actions to take, how to get organizing with people in your communities, and like how to do the actual work, right? It's not just a petition you sign and it goes into the void. It's a real tool. And then remember that like this work is clearly not being funded by like billionaires or large corporations. They for some reason like don't like us that much. So we need you, right? The reality is we have to finance this ourselves. So we all give what we can. People throw in $5 a month. Some people have $100 a month. Whatever it is that you have really allows us to do this work, because this money is not coming from anywhere else. So please movetoamend.org/donate. If that's a way that you can be a part of the movement, that is a very impactful way to do this work. So thank you for all the ways that you give of yourself. All right, Jason.
Awesome.
I guess
what's that?
I guess that's us making sense of things. How do you
I
feel?
think that's it. I think I feel good. I was going to play a joke on you and just give one-word answers this whole time, but apparently I changed my mind.
I'm really glad that you chose not to do that. Thank you. I appreciate the sort of perspective that you brought today. It's hard to know how to feel right now. So I feel like settling somewhere in between, like wanting to burn shit down and like feeling hopeful for the future, is probably a safe place to be. So here we are.
You got to make choices. No, just kidding. No, as always, it's always great to be in this dialogue with you and organizing with you. So thank you, Jessica. Thank you, everyone in the chat, for your comments, insight, participation, and the work you do. This is fun. This is fun for me. I'm glad we got to connect.
Likewise.
So
and thanks again to Alfonso for making it happen.
Yes, Alfonso, you rock. Thank you so much.
All right. See y'all later. Have a safe weekend.